वो झंडा आता था. I was in government 2014. I was the finance minister. 15. Complete normal environment. झंडा आता था पाकिस्तान का. ये आया कहाँ से? किसका है? कुछ नहीं. 5 लोग वो वीडियो उठाते थे फोन पे, भेजते थे. सब 5 मिनट बाद तुरंत फोन आता था दिल्ली से, सर क्या हो रहा है वहां पाकिस्तान. अरे कुछ नहीं हुआ यार, वो कहीं झंडा किसी ने हिलाया 2, एंड इन अ कंट्रोल एनवायरमेंट. इस कमरे को आप थोड़ा सा कह कर दीजिए, इट्स ऑपरेटेड. नाउ नोबडी डू एनीथिंग, एंड गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया वुड पैनिक एट द ड्रॉप ऑफ अ हैट. व्हाट इज हैपनिंग, हाउ इज दिस हैपनिंग? Is that this election becomes very critical, because if the assembly tomorrow decides to move a resolution, as Omar said, that this is a part of his main manifesto, is the only thing is that we will bring to the assembly a resolution questioning the abrogation of Article 70. Now it may have no value in terms of the legality of it, or it could perhaps, with a deferred thing, ask for a Supreme Court to review its judgment, go to a larger bench of 12 and so on and so forth. It doesn't materially change anything on the ground, but it creates a very complicated situation for the Union government. Thanks. Such a pleasure. Thank you very much.
For introduction, Mr. Haseeb Drabu. I think this is the 3rd or 4th year we have been meeting in one think tank meeting, and listening to him, it's something like it's quite enlightening, because we don't know what exactly is happening in that region. And few weeks back, his first reaction was, which actually stunned me, and which I thought, this is the reason we should have him here, that Farooq Abdullah is going to form government in J&K with BJP. And that took Supriya also there. So anyway,
I took a bet with her. I told Supriya, I said, let's wait and watch how it goes. But yeah, that's interesting.
So I think to begin with, you should give your views right from 370 till this moment.
Yeah. What I could do is, essentially, I have slightly different views from what are the mainstream views. And if you kind of, since I've also had the opportunity to run a newspaper in Bombay for many years, 5 years, I was at a business standard. There has to be a certain contemporary to whatever we're saying. So we'll start off with the elections as in post the Supreme Court intervention. I think the government decided that they must conduct elections. Till then I wasn't sure if at all they were going to have elections. And I'm not even today very sure in how this will pan out in terms of going forward. But if you were to give a background selection, what makes it significant is that this comes after the government of India unilaterally took a decision to read down the act of the article of the Constitution, like Article 370, but went way beyond that to bifurcate the state, make it 2 parts. It was Jammu Kashmir Ladakh. So Ladakh was converted into one unit and J&K into another unit. And the third part was to not give it the status that it had, but downgrade it to a UT. So there were 3 measures that were, one was to abrogation of the constitutional status, second was division of a state, and then third was downgrading it to a UT. Now, to the best of my knowledge and understanding, this has never happened in history ever. And I'm not even sure, the Supreme Court took a view, is whether the centre can unilaterally downgrade a state into a UT. Conceivably tomorrow, you may want to convert Wayanad into a UT. Or Darjeeling into a UT. What prevents centre from doing it? So the larger thing also fitted with her thing in terms of how the entire federal structure is being now called into question. What are the safeguards for a state? It could be Maharashtra tomorrow, it could be any state. You can have Vidarbha taken off as a UT without any reference to the state assembly. Now what compounded the problem is that when this decision is taken, the state is run by an appointee of the central government. which at that point becomes from a governor to an LG. And when the consent is sought, it is given by the guy who was appointed by the centre. So the reference to the assembly is actually a technical reference because there is no assembly. And the governor at that point of time, I think Satyapal Malik was the gentleman, gives concurrence on behalf of the state, and then it's carried forward. So that done and dusted, then this is 2019, now we're in 2024, and no elections have happened since. My own sense of this is, and this is something that I have spoken about earlier, but I'm not entirely clear on it, is that this election becomes very critical because if the assembly tomorrow decides to move a resolution, as Omar said, that this is a part of his main manifesto, is the only thing is that we will bring to the assembly a resolution questioning the abrogation of Article 70. Now, it may have no value in terms of the legality of it, or it could perhaps, with a deferred thing, ask for a Supreme Court to review its judgment, go to a larger bench of 12 and so on and so forth. It doesn't materially change anything on the ground, but it creates a very complicated situation for the Union government. And it could then open up the thing again, whether it goes to Supreme Court or what the Parliament would like to discuss it. Parliament can surely overrule that, because that has happened in the case of J&K when the autonomy resolution was passed. The Parliament chose not to even discuss it and to throw it in the bin. So while it may have no consequences in terms of the legality or the constitution, it certainly is a huge embarrassment for the Union government to face that, and it will have definitely international implications as well. That, it again opens up the whole Kashmir question: have you done right, have you done wrong, what has happened, and what had been successfully over the last 10-15 years become more a domestic issue. We'll again get into who are the people involved now, who has stakeholderships and so on and so forth, and it keeps the Kashmir issue alive. So somewhere the compulsion of the system today is to have a government that actually doesn't go that far, and that's what sets the stage for this election. To me, it makes an imminent amount of sense that to let somebody else run J&K today. BJP as a party does not have any reach in Kashmir Valley. It of course has a strong base in Jammu, and Jammu historically is second only to Nagpur in terms of the entire, if you were to look at the right-wing Hindu ideology of RSS, yeah, of course. In fact, in my opinion, even predates Nagpur as the center of that ideology. You had amazing people, the kind of stuff that they did even as early as 1951 when that autonomy thing was discussed and Delhi Agreement signed. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee came and set off an agitation, Ek Pradhan, Ek Vidhan, Ek Samvidhan, because you had a Prime Minister of Kashmir, you had a Constitution of Kashmir, and you had a separate Legislative Assembly of Kashmir. So he moved that movement from 1950 onwards and was hugely supported by the RSS throughout. In Jammu was an ideological kind of bastion for them. So they still have some amount of base there. If you see it from the valley, when you look at J&K, the misnomer is that it's like one unit. It is not. It is like we have Marathwada here, Vidarbha. You have three parts. Or actually, I do it differently. So there is, if you see J&K, there is Jhelum Valley, which is what you normally would call Kashmir, which is on the banks of Jhelum. Then there's another valley called Chenab Valley, which is between Jammu and Kashmir, the link between the two. Then there is Indus Valley, which is Ladakh. Now Indus Valley is out. And then there is Jammu Plains, which is Tavi Valley, Tavi Basin. So these are the three parts. Jhelum Valley, 90% Muslim, very little base. Then there is Pir Panchal, which is on the side of Jammu, which is 70% Muslim, 30% non-Muslim. Then you have Chenab, which is 50% Muslim, 50%. And then you have Jammu Plains, which is 70% non-Muslim, 30% Muslim. Aggregate picture is mota moti 2/3, 1/3 in terms of.
When you say non-Muslims, does it mean predominantly Hindu or not really?
Not really, because it's extremely complicated. So Ladakh, for instance, has only Buddhists.
Yeah.
So I'll sidetrack for a minute. I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. I was chairman of a bank in J&K Bank, and I was trying to kind of avail of the priority sector lendings, saying that we must lend to minorities, which gets classified as priority sector lending. And I was saying that I lend to Muslims, so Muslims are a minority in J&K, so give me that. They say, no, you can't. So because you have a Muslim majority state. I said, okay, then can I give it to Hindus? Because Jammu has a Hindus, so I'll give them their minority. They no, they are a national majority. So finally we'll end up doing only to the Ladakhis, the Buddhists. They said, yes, they are a minority both here and there. So within the setup, they say in Kashmir, 98% is Muslim, depending on small variations here and there. The 2% there are, yes, the larger sect of Hindus, but we prefer to call them Kashmiri Pandits. And they follow a very distinct routine. Nothing I have seen in my growing up, or the routines that they follow, like festivals or rituals, it all is very distinct, very, very distinct. And they consider themselves to be the top-notch Brahmins in the country, and acknowledgably so. Some of them draw their lineage from Pune, some of them draw their lineage from elsewhere, but very, very small group and very highly regarded Shaivites, all of them. Full-blown mutton eaters, can't survive a day without non-vegetarian food, have their own festivals, run their own things a little. But over time, after particularly the exodus, there has been a merger, it's become a part of the larger thing. They used to see themselves as small. They would never call themselves Hindus, they would call themselves Pandits. Yeah, very interesting way how they would do it. And small details, like the Yagnopavit they would wear is of the highest threads, 14 of them, and they have rituals of taking 2 every time and stuff like that. The chadhava for a shrine is liver, goat liver, that kind of stuff. So it's like extraordinarily different kind of cultural subsets, and language is very similar, and 80% of Kashmiri Muslims are converts from Pandits, and the whole conversion process itself has been fascinating. For week 10 days you would become a Muslim and then come back to the fold. The mother was a Muslim and the son was a Hindu, that kind of stuff had happened. So it was very, very amorphous and ambiguous.
It's difficult to...
It will be very difficult for you to identify whether surnames are same, like Haseeb Drabu, there's a Drabu, a Kashmiri, Kuldeep Drabu. Very difficult. So my brother-in-law was an IAS officer, and he was working with welfare ministry at some point, and I told one of my bosses, I said, my brother-in-law is there. He said, what is he? Actually, he's a joint secretary there. What's his name? MS Pandit. He said, oh, you should have married a Kashmiri Pandit. I said, no, his name is Muhammad Shafi Pandit. so he actually, that's a surname. Well, so that's how it is. So very difficult for you to find out, but small nuances in cooking are there. They use less of, now it's not a thing, less of onion, but use more of, saunf and stuff like that. Those very marginal differences. Interestingly, we wear the same clothes, but there are small differences, very small, which is that we wear a peran in winters, which is covered right on. So typically you also tend to have it long for future use. So the Muslims used to fold it like this, and the Pandits fold it like this. Yeah, so it's that kind of difference. It's like this is a Pandit, this is a Muslim. If you do a turban, left to right is a Muslim, right to left is a Muslim. It's like pretty much what one sees in Tamil Nadu, that this is the Iyengars and this is the Iyers and stuff like that. But less visible than that. Culturally, absolutely no difference at all. But most interestingly, no intermarriages. No intermarriages. Yeah. So tremendous amount of respect for this thing. You're such a small minority. If you start getting into things, they'll disappear. So while you eat together, to all kinds of languages same, there's no difference. But these boundaries were there. There was no social relationship.
From outside, it looks like a Pandit versus.
Yeah, that's now
But is it, what is the ground?
that's a post-90 thing. Post-90. So there's no denying that.
So why post-90? What was the trigger?
So you see what happens is by around 83, 84, trouble starts in JNK. I mean, trouble has been always there in JNK. In 64 also, we have had issues of militancy and all. But by 80s, it becomes a little more robust and visible, and it gets somewhere around the line. It starts off as a nationalistic movement which was run by JKLF, the Jammu Kashmir Election Front and all that. But eventually it gets into more Islamic form, and in 89 there is a proper concerted effort to get the Pandits out. There are obviously competing theories. A gentleman called Jagmohan was the governor, and apparently he wanted a freer kind of space because there was no ghettoization of Pandits. We lived in mixed communities. It's not that you would say that this is a... Like today, I mean, in Bombay, if you see Dadar has a certain connotation, you know, that communities live here. We didn't have that. We just had uniform across. I mean, they would live all around. It was difficult to kind of control militancy at that point. So the story goes that he actually facilitated the exodus. But the fact remains that there was massive public this thing from the mosques and all that Hindus must leave the state and all that. So yeah. People can deny it, but no question about it. It was from the... I wasn't living in Srinagar at that time, so I can't say I had first time in, but I of course knew. From the mosques every day, they would kind of say that we don't want Kashmiri Pandits here, let them go. It's also a fact that by and large Kashmiri Pandits had got jobs in central government, which meant they were in CID, in police, in whatever. So the whole overlap became a little difficult. So I remember I had gone on an assignment, and I'm talking of 1991. I had gone on an assignment with, I met Enram at some function, a Hindu, he was from the front line, and he was saying that, you know, you guys have destroyed temples. So I think it's not possible. I mean, I know what Kashmir is, and I visit temples, and I have been to temples. It's not possible. So I said, I used to work for the planning commission that time, so I said, let me go on an assignment, and I went on an assignment with Frontline. And I took a list from L.K. Advani, saying I want a list of the temples you say have been destroyed. And I went and photographed every single of them, nothing had been destroyed. They had been abandoned, but nothing had been destroyed. And I remember the cover photo of that lead story was, I went to Anantnag, which in local parlance was called Islamabad, historically. So I asked somebody, I said, there's a small Shiv temple here which has been burnt. He said, no, but come, I'll show you something more interesting. So he took me to a mosque complex. And when you opened the door, inside the mosque complex was a small temple. He said, if I had to destroy, I'll destroy this. No. Who will ever think that you will have a temple? I took a photograph of that. You can see the mosque. And inside the sand of the mosque was a temple and looked pretty in good shape, washed everything. He says, when I wash the mosque, I wash this thing also. How does it bother my life? So, I mean, that kind of attitude. Like, boss, kya karna hai, farak padta hai, unko bhi hai, apna chalta hai. He knows what he has to get from. So that was the level of relationships.
But what was your take on the first reaction on when Article 370 was applicable?
Oh, I mean, I've spoken about it extensively. I was personally very humiliated. I mean, something that was unexpected. You see, the background also comes. I was the sole negotiator between BJP and PDP when we formed the government. So my background is a bit eclectic, and in 2014, I had worked as chairman of the bank for JNK, and I worked as economic advisor, largely because Manmohan Singh wanted me to go there. So he actually, I did not know anybody in Srinagar. I had left Srinagar in 82. I was in JNU, then I was in planning commission and stuff like that. So at some point when Congress was forming a government, Mufti Saab wanted somebody who understands economics. So he reached out to Manmohan Singh, who was that time leader of the opposition, and he suggested my name, so I went there. That's how I actually got connected to it. Then eventually in 2014, I was in Bombay. Mufti Saab came and said, you should become, join the party and whatever. So I did. I contested elections, won the elections, and then we were expecting to get 32 seats. And we were hoping to form a government which at that point required, we had 75, I had about 37 or 38. So as it turned out, we got 28 seats. And as it turned out, BJP got 25 seats and all in Jammu. We got all our seats in Kashmir. So Mufti Saab was an outstanding politician. Enormous amount of respect for that man. And he took me aside and said, how are you going to run the state? If we form a government with anybody else, Jammu is excluded. And I can't run the state without Jammu. And Jammu mandate is with BJP. I have to tie with BJP. And we had contested, I had contested, everybody had contested. You see our manifesto, I wrote it. It was completely against BJP. Saying that BJP is going to come and that's the end of Kashmir, so we need to stand firm today and do it. But we'll end up doing, forming a government with BJP. At that point, he put me and said, you start this negotiations, and I met BJP and we formed a government. This is 2014. Yeah. There was no question about 370. In fact, if you read the agenda of alliance, the first paragraph, which was drafted, I vividly remember, which had Mr. Arun Jaitley with it, Ram Madhav was there, a whole set of people. We drafted this thing that BJP will not touch 370 or the special constitutional position of J&K, because special constitutional position was not restricted to 370. It's a shorthand form to use 370, but it was about 35A plus all across we had exemption. So he said, overall, the constitutional status of J&K will remain unchanged. And since our ideologies were so different, I mean, PDP was a soft separatist party. Yeah. And here was BJP kind of with its own agenda of nationalism and whatever else. It was impossible to form a political alliance, so to say. But we were pushed into a situation where BJP so towards BJP. And we called it the governance alliance. That this is meant for governance, and that's how we ran the alliance. And it worked very well. The PM came for our swearing in, and we had a good about a year. Then after about a year, I think somewhere in the January of 2015, Mufti Saab passed away. And he had a gravitas, he had a worldview, he was Home Minister, he had seen Congress. It led to a bit of a shake-up, and for 3 months, PDP could not decide whether to form a government, to continue or not continue. The governors were imposed, and then round 2 started. Again, I was the guy doing the round 2, this time representing Mehbooba Mufti, who then finally became Chief Minister. But within 4 or 5 months, or maybe a year of that, 2018, I think, 2018, it was obvious that she didn't have the thing to carry forward such a difficult alliance. And I was speaking in Delhi at some forum, and I said something that, to investors, that you forget the political issues, so let's look at the social. And she was very worried about all kinds of things, so she dropped me from the cabinet. And I moved out, and within 1 month the alliance broke. So I was seen as the large part of the alliance and such. At that point, it was never discussed, and I went back to my friends and post the 2019, that was this something in offing? No. It was post 2018 that somewhere the decision was taken that the efforts to abrogate 370 have been there during Vajpayee's time as well. In fact, there was a gentleman called Narendranath Vora, who was the Home Secretary. Yeah. He did a full report on it, saying you cannot do it. And then an innovative exercise was done this time around to do it through by downgrading the thing to a UT and stuff like that. But essentially, with the stated view was that you cannot abrogate 370. It will amount to a constitutional fraud if you do that. And it was left at that. But the real point is, there was nothing left of 370. So, which is one thing I keep saying. I don't know how well it gets taken. Yeah, it's just a skeleton, yeah. It's nothing. By 1964, 62, Guzara Nanda was the Home Minister. He gives a statement in Parliament, say, for all practical purposes, we have abrogated 370. It is no longer a wall, it's a tunnel through which everything has passed. So, and every single element, by 1986, there was nothing left of 370. Absolutely nothing. So what was the need to abrogate it? Because all laws apply. When you started, 109 laws didn't, nothing applied. It had to be, anything that was to be extended to J&K had to go through the assembly of J&K. Unless the J&K assembly approved it, a law could not be extended. But that had by now gone. It was all over. So where did the need for this arise? And then do it in a manner which was violative of a sensibility, as I said. It was, 370 had become a shorthand for the Kashmiri identity. It was called Dafa 370. Simple. And it had acquired magical properties. There was a time when Sheikh Abdullah, who was considered perhaps the biggest leader out of J&K, said in the assembly that 370 is not a Quranic inscription that can't be changed. We can change it. But it had acquired a proportion that was a safeguard, it was about everything, and the origins of it also are fascinating. If you see, 370 was never done for Kashmir or J&K. It was a Government of India Act 1918 and 1935 for all provinces. They had the same thing. Defense, Foreign Affairs, Communication, period. So it was nothing designed for J&K. It was what existed in the Government of India Act. When the Crown was ruling the provinces, you had made these arrangements. But why go by? I'm saying in 1946, before the Cabinet Mission Plan fails, Nehru moves a resolution in the Parliament of India saying all states, which was called the Objectives Resolution of Nehru. 1946, I think 14th November or something. He moves a resolution that all states will get defense, foreign affairs, communication with center, rest remains with them. And it is passed by the Constituent Assembly, which had all the digages, whether it was Ambedkar or whoever. It gets passed. When the Cabinet Mission Plan fails and partition is inevitable, they withdraw that and now say, now we need a strong center. That was the basis of 370.